places. In towns and cities, temperatures holding up, but in rural parts, they're dipping close to, if not just below freezing. So a fresh start to the weekend, but a beautiful start once again. Bright blue skies for the vast majority, barely a cloud in the sky for many away from the far north of Scotland, that is. And it will stay dry throughout Saturday, throughout Sunday as well. I think on Saturday night and into Sunday, there'll be a bit more cloud coming along. But on Saturday afternoon, those temperatures rising up to the mid to high teens once again, fairly widely under that sunshine. Now out in the North Sea, you can see some low cloud that's going to start to creep closer to the east coast of the UK on Saturday night, perhaps giving a misty, foggy start for some on Sunday and bringing some cloud in for eastern parts of the country during the daytime, but it will stay dry.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome to your Friday edition of On the Money, where we're focused on the UK's cost of living crisis, helping you beat the squeeze. So here come the Americans. The US have done a deal to send more liquefied natural gas in ships across the Atlantic, helping Western Europe end its reliance on Russia gas. Or not. We discuss, can Uncle Sam help lower fuel bills here in Britain? Plus, those P&O mass redundancies. It turns out the ferry giant did break the law, by its own admission. So what happens now? On the Money, after the GB News headlines with Rhiannon Jones.
It's just coming up to 1:01. Your top stories from the GB Newsroom. US President Joe Biden has announced a joint game plan with the EU to reduce Europe's dependency on Russian energy. The US will provide the EU with at least 15 billion additional cubic metres of liquefied natural gas by the end of the year. During a press conference in Brussels, President Biden said the EU shouldn't be subsidising Putin's brutal attack on Ukraine.
I know that eliminating Russian gas will have costs for Europe, but it's not only the right thing to do from a moral standpoint, it's going to put us on a much stronger strategic footing.
Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister says a humanitarian corridor will be opened out of the besieged city of Mariupol today for those with access to a car. Tens of thousands of civilians are believed to be trapped in the southern port city with little food, water, medicine, power and heat. It's been reported 300 people were killed when Russia bombed a theatre sheltering women and children in Mariupol last week. The UN Refugee Agency says around 3.7 million people have now fled Ukraine since the conflict began. The British Ministry of Defence says Ukraine has reoccupied towns and defensive positions up to 21 miles east of the capital, Kyiv. It also says that in the south of Ukraine, Russian forces heading to Odessa are being slowed by logistic issues and Ukrainian resistance. Alexander Nosachenko is a Ukrainian businessman turned soldier. He told us why he's fighting on the front line in Ukraine.
What happens to those who cannot escape, who have no means to travel or to immigrate to Europe? Those will be ultimately killed by Russians. That's crystal clear. And then the big question mark was, why was I doing this, training for all these 6 years? Probably for the moment like this.
North Korea's state news agency says Kim Jong-un ordered the launch of an intercontinental ballistic missile because of the long-standing confrontation with the US. New footage shows the country's leader personally overseeing the missile takeoff. This is the first full test of this long-range missile by North Korea since 2017. China has urged all sides to exercise restraint regarding the test. The Transport Secretary has called on the P&O Ferries boss to resign after he sacked 800 workers without notice, replacing them with cheaper agency staff. CEO Peter Hebblethwaite admitted the new crews are being paid below the UK's minimum wage on international routes, but he insists it is legal. Grant Shapps told GB News his actions were unacceptable, adding that he'll change the law so the company must pay minimum wage.
It was brazen, breathtaking, arrogant, as he sat there and told Parliament, we decided it would be better to break the law. We are going to make it absolutely clear that is unacceptable. They are going to need to do a U-turn because I'm going to come forward next week with a package of measures to Parliament, which will require ships that sail from here to be on a regular route, applying the regular route, to be paying the minimum wage.
Grant Shapps speaking to us earlier. The Irish Foreign Minister has been removed from stage in Belfast due to a security alert. Footage shows the moment Simon Coveney's speech was interrupted after a suspicious device was found in a hijacked van in the venue's car park. It's reported the van's driver was held at gunpoint. Mr. Coveney said he's saddened and frustrated by the incident. And in Wales, the legal requirement to wear face coverings in shops and on public transport will end on Monday, as well as the need to self-isolate. Well, First Minister Mark Drakeford says some rules, though, will have to remain in place for the next 3 weeks. Our Wales reporter Lily Hewitson joins us now to explain the changes. Lily, what more did Mark Drakeford say?
Yes, when the legal framework for COVID laws end here in Wales on Monday, most of those remaining restrictions will be scrapped. First Minister Mark Drakeford said at the press conference this afternoon that the decision-making was finely balanced for the Cabinet due to the spread of a subvariant of Omicron. Now, the legal requirement to wear a mask in shops and on public transport will be moved from law to guidance from Monday, as will the need to self-isolate when testing positive for COVID. However, the requirement to wear a mask in health and social care settings will remain, and businesses will still be required to do a risk assessment for their staff and customers.
Lily, thank you. Lily Hewitson there for us. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, let's return to Liam and On the Money.
Coming up on The Money today, Joe Biden wants to help Western Europe reduce our dependence on Russian energy, he says, by sending more liquefied natural gas in ships across the Atlantic. That is good news for America's huge LNG energy industry. But will it lower our fuel bills? We host a detailed discussion. We're at the border of Northern Ireland and the Republic, examining new rules on non-British, non-Irish nationals crossing that Irish land border. What do they mean for the local economy? And those 800 or so P&O redundancies. Turns out the age-old ferry company, now owned by Dubai-based DP World, did break the law when it failed to consult trade unions. So what happens next? We talk to those unions and an employment lawyer. Plus, we're talking to a group that wants to bring more devolution, that is, more regional autonomy to the Midlands, empowering the UK's manufacturing heartland by bringing in foreign investment. That's later in the show. As ever, I want your opinions, questions, ideas. What do you think of the issues raised in today's On the Money? What do you think of the idea of America sending us lots of gas? Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet GBNews or me @Liam Halligan. Stay with us. This is GB News on TV, DAB+, digital radio and online. I'm Liam Halligan and you're on the money. We don't need Russian gas. That's the message as the US and the European Union announce a major deal to export liquefied natural gas across the Atlantic, trying to limit Europe's reliance on Russian energy. The US is set to provide the EU with 15 billion additional cubic metres of the fuel known as LNG by the end of the year. That LNG technology allows gas to be transported in vast volumes in specially built ships, which keep the gas in liquefied form at temperatures way below zero. That allows intercontinental gas transport across oceans without relying on traditional pipelines. Joe Biden accuses Vladimir Putin of using Russia's energy to coerce and manipulate its neighbours, using profits from selling energy abroad to drive the Russian war machine, the US president says. Well, Russia controls about 25% of the world's known gas reserves. Around 40% of all the gas used in Western Europe does come from Russia. UK wholesale gas prices have spiked sixfold since Russia invaded Ukraine in February, even though Britain depends less on Russian gas than the rest of Western Europe. If this US gas deal does deliver 15 billion cubic metres of gas by the end of the year, is that a lot? Well, the US sold 22 billion cubic metres of LNG gas to Europe last year, so 15 billion more on top is significant. But Western Europe as a whole uses around 600 billion cubic metres of gas each year, so this US deal, despite all the fanfare, amounts to just about 1/40th of our annual gas use. Not very much. In the here and now, household utility bills are set to go up by £700 a year on average from April, with more rises to come this autumn as wholesale energy prices spiral. And with oil prices up around 10% over the last week, Rishi Sunak's spring statement 5% cut in petrol and diesel duty has barely registered. For motorists across much of the country, the cost of filling up has in fact continued to rise. This US-EU gas deal is good news for America's LNG gas industry, of course, but it's unlikely to lower Western Europe's reliance on Russian energy, at least in my view. Whether it's oil or gas, sanctions on Russia and Moscow's countermeasures will keep fuel prices high, aggravating the cost of living squeeze we were feeling before this ghastly conflict. And that's our on-the-money question today. Can Western Europe really do without Russian gas? As ever here on The Money, grown-up conversations with people who really know their stuff. And today it's a pleasure to be joined by Adam Scorer, CEO of the National Energy Action Campaign Group. That's a charity working to end fuel poverty across the UK. You're welcome, Adam. Ian Plummer, he's the Director of Auto Trader, knows a bit about the motoring industry. And Christina Rabbit-Saiter, an energy market expert. She founded Papaya, a tech startup in the renewable energy space. Great to see you back in the studio, Christina. You, of course, appeared on our Money Talks feature some months ago. And Miata Fanambula, Chief Executive of the New Economics Foundation. She makes her return to On the Money. Miata, great to see you as well. Let's start with you, Miata, actually. I haven't spoken to you since that spring statement. What was your general view of the spring statement, in particular, the impact or not on the energy prices?
I think my headline summary is disappointing. I think that given the extraordinary spikes that we're seeing in things like energy prices going up 50%, given the huge squeeze in the cost of living crisis, the government's economic watchdog saying the biggest squeeze that we've seen since the 1950s, I don't think the Chancellor did enough. I don't think he did enough to bear down on energy bills. And I think people will be feeling that really painfully over the coming months. The one thing I still don't understand is why he didn't put a windfall tax, for example, on energy producers and generators in order to use that to bear down on bills over the course of the next year and a half.
That's your take, Miata. Great to have you back on the show. Let's talk to now Adam Scorer of National Energy Action. I have to say, Adam, even as an objective journalist, I do think Miata is right. I don't think enough was done to help poorer families. Almost nothing to help them meet energy bills that are set to spiral in April, and then on top of that, go up again in the autumn, given the impact of this Russia-Ukraine conflict.
Absolutely right. 50% rise next week. It's coming hard. The Chancellor has had two opportunities to provide proportionate response to help, especially those on the lowest incomes, and he's made a very clear decision on both those opportunities not to do so. So nothing significant to take the sting out of the April price rises, and nothing that gives you confidence that there's a plan in place for the rises that come in October. The measures that were introduced in the spring statement, minimal effect on people on the lowest incomes, especially those who are out of work or unable to work. The Chancellor just honestly feels allergic to any significant action to help people who are in the most jeopardy from spiralling energy prices.
Ian Plummer, let's bring you in. You are the director at Auto Trader. You've forgotten more about the car industry, buying and selling motors than I'll ever know. What's your view in terms of that 5p cut in duty on petrol and diesel prices? It seems to me, as a motorist, it's just been completely blown away by ongoing increases in the oil price, with some retailers just not even bothering to pass any of that cut in the taxation they have to pay onto motorists.
Well, firstly, I would say that it's definitely welcome news. It's 5 pence in an increasingly expensive litre of petrol or diesel that is clearly only going upwards. So I think we could say that it would have been even worse if we hadn't had the 5 pence impact from the Chancellor. A tricky balancing act that he had to find, I'm sure. But if you look back to last spring, the price of fuel has gone up roughly 40 pence. So I think he would have actually gained 7 pence of VAT since then. So there was potentially room to go further. But we are seeing that the motorist out there is looking to probably drive a little less. 4 in 10 say that they're looking to drive less because of the impact of fuel prices. And potentially the benefit, I guess, of people commuting a little less these days is going to help them in that respect. But we're looking at sort of £90 or so for a tank of fuel of petrol, and around 100, almost 100 for diesel. So we are going to see some significant impacts on motorists. I would just add one last thing, which is the positive of all this, is we're seeing a big spike of interest on our platform for electric vehicles, which are getting around 30% sort of share of performance on our platforms just now, as people obviously seek the environmentally friendly, but also the sensible option in terms of economy that an electric car can represent.
Indeed, Ian, and in fairness, the government has announced today, hasn't it, plans to roll out more charging points for electric vehicles. It is an important subject. It's one we'll return to here on The Money, and it would be great to get back to talk to you specifically on that. Let's turn to Christina Rabasite. You are really a wholesale energy markets expert. You set up an app, Papaya. It helps big energy providers buy and sell energy. So what do you think of what Joe Biden has done, sending 15 billion cubic meters of LNG from America to Western Europe? I was a bit dismissive about it in my opening, but symbolically it's quite important, isn't it?
Well, as you said, it's almost doubling what US was going to send in the first place, which short term is going to calm the markets down. So you can see that, looking at prices short term at the moment, they've sort of, they've dropped by about £25. But longer term, there was very little effect, which means that this agreement it doesn't have much impact on the future, and we still need to find some sort of solutions going forward.
We've talked about getting more LNG, this liquefied natural gas on ships from Qatar, haven't we? Which, of course, is another gas superpower, as you know better than me. But Qatar's within the Persian Gulf. It's to the west of those Straits of Hormuz, where the narrow mouth to the Persian Gulf, which Iran basically controls. Does that mean we need to be friendlier with the Iranians? Does that mean we can de-sanction Iranian oil? I mean, to understand global energy markets at the moment, you need to think about economics and business and commerce. You also need to think about history and geopolitics and geography. It really seems quite an incredible moment on global energy markets now.
Yes, it is. And what it's really showed is that we need to become a lot more independent than we are. So now turning to US, going to other countries, it doesn't solve the problem that we're in now, which is reliance on foreign imports. And I think that's what we need to really address more than anything else. Making deals with parties that are slightly better than Putin, but still a danger, will probably cause problems later down the line.
Let's go back to you, Adam Scorer. You are from National Energy Action. Christina and I were just sort of having a highfalutin discussion there about geopolitics and the great game. You're talking to people all the time who are struggling to meet their energy bills. How serious do you think this situation will get, given that we've got this 54% increase in the off-gem energy price cap coming in April, and that rise in the off-gem energy price cap, of course, was announced before this Russia-Ukraine conflict impacted global energy markets in the way it has?
Well, it's catastrophic. I mean, to be honest, it was pretty cataclysmic in October when the prices went up. With the average direct debit bill come next week is going to shift from about £100 to £164. For the average expenditure for someone on a prepayment meter is going to jump from £1,300 a year to over £2,000 a year. I mean, that's catastrophic. Incomes just have not, for the lowest incomes, have nowhere near kept pace. I mean, we know they've gone into reverse. So the choices that people, we used to say people had a choice, heating or eating. Well, forget that. Scrub that. People have got no choices anymore when they have those sort of constrained budgets and the costs of those essentials going through the roof. So it's great, more LNG coming in from the States. We're not particularly exposed to Russian gas, but everything we buy is on a globally traded market. And the prices has been enormously high for some time. And the government seems to be, fingers crossed, hoping that the market will sort itself out, that the drops in wholesale prices will lead over to the retail prices, and this problem will disappear. Well, it won't. We've got a catastrophic situation now, which will only get worse come October. What we needed to see from government, even though it's obviously going to wait until September, October before it decides whether it's going to intervene again, is a plan that puts the interests of people on the lowest incomes and in the least efficient homes, whose lives and health are in jeopardy because of this crisis, put them first. This attempt to have a broad and shallow impact for as many consumers as you can is one that fails, absolutely fails, the interests of those people in the greatest harm. So I'm in terror. We hope it's unseasonably warm. Let's hope that continues for the rest of the spring. But unless we have a plan for next winter, I tell you, it will be beyond catastrophic in terms of financial hardship. It'll be catastrophic in terms of people's health, their mental well-being. We have to be ready that more than the average 10,000 people will die over the winter because they can't afford to keep their homes warm.
Well, Adam, I know you're a man of moderate temperament, and you pick your words carefully, and I'm taking your words, which are very strong, extremely seriously. This is an important discussion. We're going to carry it on after the break with my distinguished guest and bring in more guests too as we discuss whether or not US LNG gas exports can help us keep our fuel bills down here in the UK. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Do stay with us after the break for more on this important topic. Stay with us. You're On the Money.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. You're on the money. We're discussing sky-high fuel bills. It's such an important subject, and particularly whether or not those newly announced exports of LNG, that's liquefied natural gas, coming across the Atlantic like a convoy, like an energy Marshall Plan, can help to lower fuel bills here in the UK. Lots of distinguished guests. They're still with me, and I'm joined also now by Howard Cox, founder of the Fair Fuel UK campaign. Howard, you have been working day and night to highlight the problem of rising petrol and diesel prices. We saw Rishi Sunak do a 5p cut in fuel duty during his spring statement on Wednesday. What's been the impact of that across the country among the petrol stations that you and your colleagues watch so closely?
Well, hello, Liam. It's good to be on your show. Quite honestly, I mean, it'd be churlish for me not to actually be grateful to Rishi to put an 8% cut in a levy. It's an unprecedented cut. But the worst thing about this, and I've been saying on your show and much of the media for a long enough time with Robert Halfon, we must have it passed on. I honestly, so I'd say 1 in 3 garages that I'm hearing have done it and cut it. But 2 out of 3 obviously haven't, and we just do not understand that. Obviously, they have bought bulk fuels beforehand. Obviously, they paid the higher fuel duty to the government then. But I would have thought the government could have actually put a deadline, say, for another 3 or 4 days to allow the actual ordering process to be fair on especially the small independents.
Miata Fampola, let's go back to you. You will have been listening closely to Adam Scorer of National Energy Action, who was speaking just before the break. I mean, how concerned are you in terms of the kind of political fallout of this, the societal fallout of this? Do you think there'll be refusals to pay? Do you think there'll be protests? Do you think this coming fuel crisis, this ongoing squeeze in the cost of living, could lead to, political unrest?
I mean, look, possibly. Look, I thought Adam really set it out incredibly powerfully and eloquently. The thing you have to remember is that the extraordinary squeeze that we're seeing now comes on top of, a decade in which living standards hasn't budged, particularly those at the bottom end. People who, for example, are reliant on social security, whether that's universal credit or other benefit payments, have seen that cut since 2010. You had that little respite with the £20 uplift, which was taken away last autumn. And then we're seeing an £11 billion real-term cuts to social security because of inflation and the fact that we haven't uprated benefits at the right level. And so, for a lot of people, this is catastrophic. It is catastrophic. And you can't help but feel, when you're hearing stories about some of the awful choices, and as Adam said, it's no longer a choice now. People are like, I'm not heating my home, I'm not feeding my kids. It is quite hard to understand why the Chancellor was so tone deaf to that and did a budget that, quite frankly, didn't help those at the bottom end. His national insurance threshold hike, for example, 70% of people are helped by that. But by the way, the 30% aren't, are those that need it the most. So for me, that's absolutely unforgivable. And I think at some point, people will feel abandoned by this government because, this isn't run-of-the-mill stuff that you can say people just suck it up. It's absolutely extraordinary. And why the Chancellor doesn't see this and doesn't see the imperative to step in and help where he can, because, by the way, he has the headroom, he has the fiscal space to do that. He just chose not to. And that was a political choice. I think when that hits people, that is where the scope for genuine anger alongside frustration and desperation kicks in.
Ian Plummer, let's bring you back in. You're from Auto Trader. We discussed EVs before, electric vehicles. Are you seeing an uptick in sales of electric vehicles? Obviously, there's been an expansion in the sale of electric vehicles, but an acceleration of that growth in light of these higher petrol and diesel prices. And what would you say to those? What would you say to somebody watching this show, listening on the radio? They're driving a diesel van. They need it to keep their business going. Electric vehicles, not all vehicles, shapes and sizes are available, and those that are often very expensive.
There's a lot in that, so I'll try and unpack a little bit. I think, first of all, there clearly is a big spike of interest in electric vehicles we can see on the platform. We're seeing roughly 30% of people looking at new cars actually focusing their attention on electric. That's ahead of the sales rate that we're seeing in the market, which is a bit under 20%. It's growing fast. It was just above 10% for the full year 2021. So there's a growing interest. There's a lack of actual sales of any cars at the moment in the market, electric vehicles included, simply because there are supply shortages of vehicles out there. But in answer to your other points, I think, yes, the vehicles we're talking about here, electric, are more expensive. They're typically around 35% more expensive on a like-for-like comparison to a petrol or diesel equivalent. That's an awful lot of money for anybody to afford. But that gap can narrow when you the car on finance, and the residual values of electric are holding particularly well. And that overall gap, if you like, can narrow further when you consider what we call the total cost of ownership of a car, which basically takes into account the servicing cost, the insurance cost, but crucially also the fuel difference. And clearly the electricity you put into your electric vehicle is significantly cheaper, even despite recent price rises there too, than the petrol or diesel you're putting into your vehicle. So there is, roughly speaking, about £150 benefit for those on an electric product compared to a petrol or diesel per 1,000 miles driven. So if you consider that typically a lot of people will be doing 10,000 miles, you can quickly get to a chunky sort of £1,500 gap. That won't necessarily always be enough, multiplied by, let's say, 3 years of ownership of the vehicle, to bridge the price gap. And I think there the government could still do more to incentivize us to buy those electric vehicles and encourage this shift towards a greener, more sustainable form of energy that we all know makes sense in the current environment.
Howard Cox, briefly, what do you think of that? You've heard it there from Auto Trader. Ian Plummer knows his stuff. Are EVs the answer?
I've got a lot of respect for Auto Trader. I really have.
Yeah.
And the simple fact is that we've got a lot. I mean, we need about a 3-hour program on this, Liam. I'm just finishing a report with some major scientists on the cradle to grave comparison of emissions from EVs versus internal combustion engine. I'm afraid we'll have some bad news on that one. I'm afraid there's not much difference. There's, in terms of recycling batteries, the cost of replacing batteries, actually the mining of the elements that go into these batteries, slave tradies, all these sorts of things we've got to take into consideration. And then there's the national grid. How's the national grid going to be actually to cope with this? Actually going to be powered? Is it going to be powered by fossil fuels? And then we've got all this whole problem of the cost of EVs being 30 to 40%. Quite rightly, they are. I've driven EVs. I've got a hybrid EV. I think they're brilliant. They're wonderful. But I'm afraid that we still have a very small interest of these. Yes, there's a significant percentage increase on a small a number base. But what we need to do is actually recognise that we shouldn't be forced into one form of modal transport by 2030. The government didn't tell us about it. It wasn't any of their manifestos, and we should have been actually talking about this. We all want to breathe clean air. We all want to have cleaner fuel technologies. But I think it's the time that they consulted with us and looked at other ways of actually, including electric vehicles, to actually power our vehicles in the years to come.
Christina, you came to the UK from Lithuania, a country right next to Russia, as a teenager. You are now an energy industry, much respected professional. What do you think listening to us bunch of Brits talking about energy?
Well, sort of going back to electric vehicle subject, what terrifies me is the fact that by 2030, if there's no other cars but electric on the road, we're going to double the demand for electricity.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? The demand going up, the prices will go up, and forget affording it, but the fuel is going to be a problem. And it doesn't mean it's renewable. You know, it might still come from gas, might still come from coal or elsewhere. So it's
Do you think renewables can replace fossil fuels as quickly as the COP26 agenda suggests, or do you think this Russia-Ukraine conflict means there's a bit more reality now in this debate?
So I think we genuinely had a reality check because we were shown how much actually we rely on gas. Everyone is sort of speaking about renewables and wind, but let's face it, wind and solar will not do it alone. We need something in place to balance out the intermittency, and at the moment is gas. So even, let's say today, sunny day, 50% of electricity comes from gas, even though solar is at its full capacity. So it just shows that wind and solar on their own are not able to do it until we combine them with something like hydrogen, batteries, and other technologies. That will not happen overnight. So renewables is definitely the answer, but there's so much more that has to be done, and the strategy has to expand across so many different varieties of technologies to actually make it happen.
Well, we could indeed discuss this for 3 hours, as Howard Cox says. Christina Rabasati, great to have you here. You are an energy industry expert, the CEO of the Papaya Energy Trading Platform. We had Miata Fiampula of the New Economics Foundation, Adam Scorer of National Energy Action, Ian Plummer, the Director of Auto Trader, Howard Cox, founder of Fair Fuel UK. Thank you all, as ever, on the money. Grown-up discussions with people who know their stuff. Coming up, we talk P&O redundancies. It turns out the age-old ferry giant did break the law by its own admission. More on that after the GB News headlines with Rhiannon Jones.
Thank you, Liam. 1:34, your top stories from the GB Newsroom. President Joe Biden has announced a joint game plan between the US and the EU that will reduce Europe's dependency on Russian energy. As part of the plan, the US will provide the EU with at least 15 billion additional cubic metres of liquefied natural gas by the end of the year. The Irish Foreign Minister has been removed from stage in Belfast mid-speech after a suspicious device was found in a hijacked van in the venue's car park. It's reported the van's driver was held at gunpoint. Simon Coveney says he's saddened and frustrated by the incident. In Wales, the legal requirement to wear a face covering in shops and on public transport will end on Monday, as well as self-isolation after a positive COVID test. All legal restrictions were set to be removed, but First Minister Mark Drakeford says rising transmission and hospitalisations means some have to stay.
The rapid spread of infections caused by BA2 means that we need to retain some of these protections in law for a little while longer. And at the same time, we will continue to issue authoritative advice to help people take those steps which protect us all.
Mark Drakeford there, the boss of dairy giant Arla, says the price of a pint of milk is likely to go up as farmers struggle with rising costs of feed, fertiliser and fuel. In the last 10 years, consumer prices have gone up 26%, whereas the cost of milk has dropped by 7%. TV Online and DAB Plus Radio, this is GB News. It's back to Liam and On the Money in just a moment. Don't go anywhere.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome back. You're on the money with me, Liam Halligan, on GB News, TV, DAB Plus digital radio, and online. It's 1:38. Now, we've been following the P&O ferry story closely here on the money since 800 seafaring staff were made redundant via a pre-recorded video call last week. Nice. And today, the Prime Minister's backing calls for P&O's boss to resign after the company admitted to breaking the law, having failed to consult with UK trade unions. But only yesterday, P&O boss Peter Hepplethwaite told MPs that trade unions should have been consulted, though he said he chose not to. Well, GB News asked Transport Secretary Grant Shapps this morning for his response.
What this company did, by the boss of P&O's own admission, was deliberately went out to deceive us and break the law. I mean, he actually says it himself. It was brazen, breathtaking, arrogant, as he sat there and told Parliament, we decided it would be better to break the law. We are going to make it absolutely clear that is unacceptable.
Well, join me now to discuss this is Charles Boyle. He's the International Director of Legal Services at Nautilus. That's the specialist maritime union. And we also have Beverly Sunderland, Managing Director, at Crossland Employment Solicitors, returning to the show. We spoke with Beverly last week, of course. Let's go to you first, Charles. What do you make of this situation? You've now got a P&O senior executive admitting in front of a panel of British lawmakers in the House of Commons yesterday that he broke the law.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, it's absolutely shocking. I was at the Transport Select Committee yesterday, and I was in a room that was full of politicians of different colours and plenty of lawyers in there too. In other words, a bunch of people who don't always agree with each other and have different views, but yet the views was completely unanimous, that everyone was completely shocked about Mr. Hepplethwaite's admission yesterday that he absolutely chose to ignore Section 188 of the Trade Union Act, which requires P&O to enter into lengthy collective consultations with Nautilus, and he thought that didn't apply to him because he said it wouldn't make any difference. So yeah, it's absolutely shocking.
Beverly Sunderland, let's go to you. You are an employment lawyer at Crossland Employment Solicitors. When we spoke last week, we were trying to read the runes and understand what was going on here. So it seems that P&O did break the law in terms of not consulting trade unions before making these large-scale redundancies, but they're not breaking the law in the sense that they're bringing in agency workers from outside the UK and paying them a lot less than the minimum wage, even though the ships involved will be docking in Britain. How does that work?
Well, Liam, as I think I said last week, it's a hugely complicated situation and a complicated area of the law, because it will depend where the ship is flagged or vessel is flagged, where the journey starts and ends. That's really key in terms of UK employment rights. And at the moment, we don't have any definitive knowledge as to exactly how much these people are being paid. But all I can say is, at the risk of giving everybody a very detailed and probably quite boring law lecture, it is quite complicated. But I think what we need to focus on is, in the UK, trying to stop this total trouncing of all employment rights and all laws, and to have a CEO sitting there in front of the lawmakers of this land and saying, yeah, I knew I should have done it, but I chose not to. And that, for me, is the unacceptable part.
Charles, what do you think of this? I mean, when I last looked, P&O's routes ran from Liverpool to Dublin, from Scotland to Northern Ireland, from Dover to Calais. These are British ports in the main, all journeys either originating in or returning to British or Irish ports. How can this company, having admitted it's broken the law in terms of trade union consultation, how it imposed these redundancies, how can it then legally employ people below the minimum wage, which is what, after all, the CEO talked about at the House of Commons yesterday?
Yeah, well, the premise of your question is absolutely correct. There is absolutely no doubt that British employment law applies to these seafarers, because what determines the extraterritorial extent of UK employment laws is where the seafarers are based, or whether they have a sufficiently close connection with the UK. And these seafarers who used to work with P&O obviously do. So there's no doubt that general employment laws apply to them. However, there is a bit of a wrinkle when it comes to talking about the National Minimum Wage Act. The government takes the view, under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, which entitles all flags of ships to what's called innocent passage in UK waters, the government takes the view that it can't interfere in the internal economy of a ship by imposing the National Minimum Wage Act on some ships. But basically, in this case, we've actually had amendments to the National Minimum Wage Act 2 years ago, which does apply the Act to any flag of ship as long as it's working in UK territorial waters or the UK sector of the continental shelf. However, one of the exceptions was the exception for innocent passage. That's the right to pass through UK waters. And the government are basically taking the view that a ferry that goes from the UK on an international route to France or the Netherlands, for instance, or the Republic of Ireland, is actually exercising its right to innocent passage under the United Nations Convention, even although it starts off at the UK and spends at least half its voyage in UK territorial waters. I do not agree with the government's position on this, and we lobbied hard to get the extension 2 years ago, the one I referred to earlier, and we will be lobbying even harder now to get the government to apply the National Minimum Wage Act to all regular ferry routes that leave from the UK, regardless of where they go.
Well, Beverly, Charles has manfully tried to explain what's going on. I got a lot of that, my head's spinning. It sounds to me as if there could be legal action, either civil actions, class actions, or actions brought by trade unions. Do you think that is an idle speculation?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, first of all, well done to Charles for expressing a very complicated area of the law in such simple terms. But certainly in terms of action, I think one of the problems, and I'm quite sure that Charles won't disagree with me on this, is that if all the reports are true, a lot of the P&O staff have been offered a lot of money in terms of a UK-based settlement agreement. So P&O obviously recognise that they have rights under UK law, and they've been offered settlement agreements and offered quite a lot of money. Now, for them, the choice is they either sign up to those agreements or they wait for 18 months, 2 years to have their cases heard in the Employment Tribunal, and then they would only get compensation based on the loss that they suffer. So if they've gone out and managed to get another job, then they're not going to have much of a loss, and therefore they're not going to get as much compensation. So it's a really difficult situation because all of these people have been ousted in the most terrible circumstances, but ultimately they'll have mortgages, they've got families, they need to put food on the table. So they're going to have to make that very difficult choice. Now, of course, what the trade unions might do in terms of lobbying and any action that they take, I think that is definitely one for Charles.
Of Crossland Employment Solicitors, and indeed Charles Boyle of the Maritime Union Nautilus. Really interesting discussion. I learnt a huge amount from that, a very, very complex situation. Now, moving on, the Irish government's voicing concerns over the UK government's suggestion that checks are needed on EU citizens entering Northern Ireland from the Republic of Ireland. The UK is looking to put a visa-style system in place similar to the US. But at this week's British-Irish Intergovernment Conference, the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Ireland, Simon Coveney, asked for special treatment. Our Northern Ireland reporter, Dougie Beattie, has more from Flurrybridge on the Irish border.
Yes, good afternoon. Welcome to a very sunny Flurrybridge, and I'm in the EU. Quite literally 5 steps to my left, and we're in the UK. It's as close as that. There's no infrastructure here, no border of any sort, and goods flow quite freely up and down. In fact, it's amazing how we peel stories back, the one of P&O, and we have found out that nearly 20% of the lorries coming from the south are heading to British ports in the north to avoid the protocol legislation, the checks that have been put in place for the Brexit deal. There, 100% of them are being enforced in Dublin, where only 30% of them are actually in place in Northern Ireland. So it gives those businessmen in the south a clear run into the north. Well, we've also got to look at non-EU citizens. A lot of them work in these lorries, and they are going to go up in value because they're going to have to apply to get in and out of Northern Ireland with a visa-style system. It is going to be another mess in the round of the oven-ready deal of Boris Johnson.
Dougie Beattie, brilliantly explained. Another complex story. The devil's in the detail. We will return to that. Dougie Beattie there in Flurrybridge in Northern Ireland on the border with the Republic. Back in January, one of Britain's most prominent Iraqi-born entrepreneurs, Dr. Majid Al-Sadi, appeared on The Money to talk about his wish to boost trade between Britain and the Middle East. As the founder of the Centre for the New Midlands, Dr. Al-Sadi hopes the UK's manufacturing heartland can play a bigger role in deepening trade relations between the UK and the Middle East. Dr. Al-Sadi's think tank also wants more devolution in the Midlands. That is greater regional autonomy. And he joins me now, along with the Managing Director for the Centre for the New Midlands, Chris Smith. Gentlemen, welcome both to the On the Money studio on this sunny Friday. Dr. Al-Sadi, nice to see you again.
Nice to see you.
So tell us a bit more about your vision of bringing more investment to the Middle East and a more independent the West Midlands and a more independent West Midlands.
Well, thank you for having us, Liam. I only came back from Baghdad a few days ago, and following on our interview in January, I talked to 4 ex-prime ministers, party leaders, politicians, businessmen, and they all asked the same question we asked in the program. We need to see more British companies, more British products in the market. Me and Chris were working on several initiatives, one of which we have the roundtables next Tuesday to talk to 25 businessmen in the Midland to encourage them basically to help on the export of more goods into the Middle East.
It's tough, Chris, isn't it? This Russia-Ukraine conflict has really knocked us sideways in terms of the British economy. We saw in the spring statement on Wednesday much reduced growth forecast, still quite chunky growth, 3.8% as we bounce back from pandemic and lockdown and so on. But it is a tough environment to raise money for investment, isn't it? Wherever that investment's coming from.
It is, and obviously, clearly the global conflict and the global challenges of the pandemic are clearly, so challenging for the West Midlands, but also the broader UK economy. But the whole premise of what we're trying to do with the Centre for the New Midlands is all about, trying to put a spotlight on what's working well in the West Midlands, what's not working perhaps so well, and how we can also, work with others, learn from others across the UK, to hopefully build a better West Midlands region.
What isn't working well, if I may focus on? Is there enough skills? Is there enough training? Enough apprenticeships? Is there enough good labour? Enough sites where you can build factories? Planning law? What are the obstacles?
I think the Midland area have a huge potential in terms of skilled labour, experience, factories, legislation. I think the problem is marketing the Midland, marketing the British products post-Brexit in a proper way, opening a new market, because obviously we were depending on the EU for export. Despite the fact that most of the British industries are in the Midland area, in Birmingham, in Derby, the trains, the automotive, the aerospace, the technology, the big universities, but we haven't seen the Midland area truly represented in the international trade. Now
we talk about the Northern Powerhouse. What happened to the Midlands engine? That was a kind of political catchphrase, wasn't it? But the political ending, the Midlands engine, Chris, doesn't really seem to have sparked into life.
Yeah, I mean, from a think tank perspective, I mean, our focus is absolutely on the West Midlands, actually. So we're looking at predominantly the geography of the combined authority, and obviously the mayor's kind of geography.
Andy Spring, right?
Andy Street, indeed. So the big areas for us actually as a think tank are housing and communities, of which it's an area that obviously affects all of us and across the country. The second one's really around the digital environment, but the third, and obviously where Dr. Al-Saadi is obviously really going to be excelling, I'm sure, as our president, is all around this kind of notion of the global West Midlands and how we really start making sure the region fires on all cylinders.
I mean, the West Midlands has welcomed all comers from around the world over generations to become, the political, the economic and commercial heartland that it is. Foreign investment's played a key role, Dr. Al-Saadi. I must ask you, this isn't... You have raised a lot of money for British industry over the years, and you've got an exemplary reputation here in the UK. We're delighted you're on our show, but it must make you sad. Dubai is a long way from Iraq. They're completely different countries, obviously. Yeah. But this isn't good, is it? It's not a good look. This P&O dispute, obviously, the owner is DP World. It is a Dubai-based company. Absolutely. They've got their British CEO admitting to lawbreakers to breaking the law.
Yeah,
it's astonishing. Yeah, we have to get over this image problem.
It's outrageous for a CEO to actually admit breaking the law and employing less paid employees. I think it's ridiculous, to be honest. The fact is, restructuring of a company requires to reduce a number of staff, but he should have gone through the proper channel, talking to the union, a proper compensation to the employees, and find a more creative way to enhance the company instead of getting rid of people in such circumstances with the economical situation pro-Brexit and pro-Corona. I think it's outrageous, to be honest.
If I can just add, I mean, although I moved up to Coventry in 2003 for university, my hometown's Folkestone, so
you know all about it.
I've got some very good friends who have just been let go from P&O, who've done 20 years of service, and it's not a way you treat staff or anyone, quite frankly.
Chris Smith, Dr. Majid Al-Saadi of the Centre for the New Midlands, you're welcome back in the On The Money studio in the future. Let us know how you're getting on with those money-raising efforts. That's all we've got time for. We will be back at 1 p.m. on Monday. But for now, have a lovely weekend. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and that was a week of On The Money.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGibbon. Today, just like every other day this week, is dry for most, with sunny skies up and down the country, and it will feel warm in that sunshine with light winds under this area of high pressure, which is now centred across the UK. So very little airflow around that high. That means that under the sun, it will feel warm with temperatures well above average for the time of year. There is some cloud to speak of, mainly for Shetland, where a few outbreaks of rain are possible through the afternoon, light rain generally, and some patchy cloud affecting the coasts of Western Scotland and parts of Northern Ireland. One or two clouds bubbling up elsewhere, but by and large it's essentially a sunny afternoon and temperatures doing well as well.